We invited the expert to our studio with whom we are going to discuss Chernobyl catastrophe and common situation in nuclear energy sphere. He is Yurii Urbanskiy, Executive Director of National Ecology Center of Ukraine. Nice to meet you.
Hello.
And so, how the accident in Chernobyl nuclear power plant influenced the development of nuclear energy sphere in Ukraine, and what lessons were made for the world?
As you show in the previous broadcast, there was actually accident triggered mass protests, and which where people concerned about environmental situation in Ukraine and consequences of Chernobyl started to protest against the state. And in the result, there was moratorium which was imposed in Ukraine in 1991, and moratorium banned the construction of any further nuclear power plants in Ukraine. Unfortunately, it was lifted in 1993, and then construction of few nuclear blocks continued. But Ukraine was already in the stage of financial crisis, and a number of such constructions frozen till later times.
Is this the way to attract the world's attention to Ukrainian problems?
Well, actually, Chernobyl attracted really a lot of attention to the problems in Ukraine, and there were different times. There were times when we were offered the assistance. There were times when Chernobyl was used as the matter for blackmail of the Western countries. Ukraine demanded more money for construction of new nuclear power plants, and that was actually safe behavior from our officials in the country which suffered most from the nuclear accident. The government wanted to build new power plants which are also using nuclear energy.
And on your point of view, whether Ukrainian authority does everything possible to avoid and overcome the consequences of this great disaster? Because it seems that talks around the Chernobyl disaster happen only on occasion of this Chernobyl anniversary every year.
Yes, you're partly right, because especially media remember Chernobyl only in April, but actually you give good sign, because we have anniversary a few days ago and you still keep talking about this issue. If our authority do everything they can, no, actually I don't agree with our representative in United Nations that we are close to the final stage. We are too far from the final stage of handling the consequences of the Chernobyl accident. We are close to the next stage when the old sarcophagus will be closed by the new confinement with the new construction, which will close it from the environment, and actually it will not protect environment from the remaining nuclear unit. It will protect nuclear unit from the environment, because currently the old sarcophagus is suffering from rains, from the snows, the water goes in, the air goes in, and it facilitates release of extra radioactivity into the environment.
So theoretically, nature can heal all this great wound on our...
Nature cannot heal it, nature can adjust. And what we see in the Chernobyl zone is that nature, except humans, is adjusting to the consequences of the accident. The forests grow. For example, everyone knows so-called red or rusty forest, which was extremely dangerous by the contamination from the nuclear power plant, from the Chernobyl. And these days there is no red forest anymore. On this side we see the green forest, which keeps growing. The only what we can notice is this high levels of radiation, and radiation can be measured only by people. And nature, animals or insects, they don't measure it, they just simply adjust to it. And what we see in the Chernobyl zone is that nature goes on, people don't.
But why our authorities trying to hide the real stage of this issue in Ukraine?
No, actually nobody is hiding the situation. It's not favorable for Ukrainian authorities to hide real picture, because we cannot deal with consequences by our own. So especially now having difficult times in Ukraine, we really need international assistance. And that's why there is no reason to hide what's really happening in the Chernobyl zone, and there is no need to hide consequences of the accident.
Discussion of this Chernobyl issue is always followed by international involvement of representatives of international community to this issue. In this topic, is this topic is still urgent for the world, and why they are interested in this?
It's yes and no. And actually, if you know, after Chernobyl, the world was shocked by the accident in Japan on Fukushima reactors. And somehow that Fukushima accident kind of shadowed the Chernobyl problem, but at the same time it emphasized the problem. It was the clear sign that accident on the nuclear power plant can happen in any country without any dependence, either it's a communist country or it's a capitalist country. Yeah? And Japan was a symbol of the highest level of technology development in the world, and no one would expect that such accident will happen in Japan, and it did. So currently, many countries in the world, they revise their plans about use of nuclear energy. If you look on the statistics, now only China who is actively builds new nuclear units, and many countries declared their plans about phase out from use of nuclear energy.
We have video material about international involvement to Chernobyl issue. Let's watch it together. Well, Ukraine has 15 Soviet-era nuclear reactors built during the Soviet times. 12 were designed to be shut down by 2020. Kyiv is determined to keep all reactors running for at least 10 years beyond their expiry date. The safety of Ukraine's reactors cannot be guaranteed because of close location to armed conflicts, accidents and safety issues. Wildfire damaged Chernobyl plant in a very serious way, and radioactive cesium from Chernobyl can still be detected today.
The largest nuclear disaster in history occurred 30 years ago at the Chernobyl's nuclear power plant. The meltdown, explosion and nuclear fire that burned for 10 days injected enormous quantities of radioactivity into the atmosphere and contaminated vast areas of Europe and Eurasia. The International Atomic Energy Agency estimates that Chernobyl released 400 times more radioactivity into the atmosphere than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima in 1945.
Daily Le Monde saying that a Chernobyl or Fukushima type accident can happen in any nuclear power plant in Europe and indeed in the world. So we are never safe from a major nuclear disaster as we had 30 years ago in Chernobyl.
Two European public lenders, Euratom and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, approved loans over 300 million euros, each for a so-called safety upgrade project necessary to keep Ukraine's aging nuclear reactors running.
The biggest problem is that the impact of this accident in Chernobyl is not over. I know that Ukrainians, like also Belarusians, really want to live outside of the impact and the risks of the nuclear catastrophe.
While the European Union is trying to help Ukraine's political transition, Europe's financial support is cementing the country's defense on an outdated and highly unsafe nuclear sector. To avoid further instability and political and environmental risks, European institutions need to offer better oversight and funding for alternative energy sources.
The nuclear catastrophe as such has the problem that the impact never ends, and we published in Europe, me and others, new scientific studies which clearly show that, for example, the increase of cancer, the increase also of other diseases.
There are currently more than 400 nuclear reactors operating around the world, with 65 new ones under construction and another 165 on order to plant. All operating nuclear power plants are generating large quantities of nuclear waste that will need to be stored for thousands of years to come.
Well, taking into account that nuclear energy is admitted as dangerous one, so can we watch that civilized world is trying to refuse from the nuclear energy? And what is the statistic in the Ukraine?
Well, actually, you say it correct, the civilized world. Yeah. In different countries, we see different situation, and some countries are more advanced in phasing out from the nuclear, like Germany, like Austria, which banned use of nuclear energy even before Chernobyl accident happened. But now we see signals from France, from Belgium, from United Kingdom, that those countries are already very close to start phasing out from nuclear. If we take France, we see that nuclear becomes more expensive, just more expensive. France is addicted to nuclear, but they face the situation that nuclear cannot compete with other sources of energy.
No, it's quite strange why they don't want to.
Because with each accident, because with development of the safety conditions, every safety requirement costs money. So they need to upgrade the reactors, and that's why it becomes more and more expensive. And also we can compare with the situation in Ukraine, because as your news report said, Ukraine is also seeking money for safety upgrades of existing nuclear power plants. And from one side, yes, such upgrade is needed. From another side, such upgrade is used as excuse for extension of lifetime of these reactors. But even if you compare the level of such upgrades with other countries, it's still not sufficient to reach, well, I cannot say absolute safety condition, because there is no absolute safety, yeah? But at least to reach some acceptable safety levels comparing to other countries.
I see. And the next question is quite philosophic one. Can we say that energy issues and environmental issues can unite the world in front of the common danger? Because, or all the countries will try to overcome the global problems by their own?
As we can see on the example of climate negotiations, when the world is facing other problems as global climate change, when it comes to real threat, the countries can unite and can reach some compromise and develop the common position.
To forget about the all political differences and different.
Well, they will never forget about their differences, but at least they can adjust their positions. And we see a set of countries which are leaders in the world, and others either follow them or kind of stay aside and not respected by the global community. Yeah. But in terms of the nuclear energy, it's still more diverse situation between countries. And for example, recently we had visit of former Prime Minister of Japan, Nato Kan, who was Prime Minister during the Fukushima accident, and that accident absolutely changed his attitude towards nuclear energy. He came to Ukraine, and in his speeches he said, "I want nations to unite against nuclear power." And he is looking for high political support for his position.
I see. And every year Ukraine unites on 26th of April. It's not very, like a happy occasion, but at least we have a story about events dedicated to Chernobyl University in the capital. And what the event concerning Chernobyl catastrophe were provided in the capital of Ukraine, watching the following story.
Ukrainians commemorated the anniversary of the Chernobyl tragedy in different cities of Ukraine. 2016 was declared a year of honoring of the liquidators of the Chernobyl accident and the memory of the victims. In Kyiv, organizers have already held a traditional campaign with lighting candles near Chernobyl Memorial and St. Michel Square. Parents told me that some years ago there was a tragedy in Chernobyl and killed many people. I think we need to remember and honor those who died there. I light a candle for the memory of those people, victims, against disaster that took place exactly 30 years ago. Also this year, in underpass to European Square, Ukrainian Institute of National Remembrance presented documentary installation under the sarcophagus. The main leitmotif of the exhibition is that the roots of the nuclear disaster at Chernobyl in the system of governance. At the installation was shown that before the tragedy, 5 accidents, 29 halting and 63 stops of equipment had happened in Chernobyl station. It is lost homeland for me. I remember I was walking with my parents when workers demolished the village. I remember when bulldozer demolished the cemetery and all bones was sticking out. There was something symbolic in the moment of building. Ideas of peaceful atoms seem to be as good and simple as the ideas of the communist ideology. Ideas of peaceful atoms supposedly give us cheap energy, offer equality, but we see where this idea led Ukraine. Visitors can see all chronology of tragedy in Chernobyl and even hear the original recording of the voices of liquidators. Another cultural court of Chernobyl offered Portuguese street art artist Antonio Correia. He painted one of the walls of the central street of Chernobyl. Working on such location is a challenge and a dream for many street artists and a great responsibility. This drawing linked to the accident that occurred 30 years ago, the accident that has affected many countries and generation, artists said. After 30 years, Ukraine have a lot of new questions and new ways to answer them.
Well, I would like to finish our conversation with your own forecast concerning the situation around Chernobyl and nuclear energy sector in Ukraine. So, how can you assess the perspectives of the development of actions directed to liquidation of the consequences of Chernobyl? Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, Ukraine will have to spend a lot of money to manage these consequences, and this assistance what we have so far, it's not enough to do everything. It's just enough as a first measure to build new confinement, to build temporary storage for spent fuel from the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. But then the time will come when Ukraine will need to start the commission of other 3 reactors at Chernobyl power plant, and this costs a lot of money. Then Ukraine will start the commission of sarcophagus with remains of the first block, and it will cost much more money than everyone could expect. And unfortunately, the world will not be able to help us with these finances forever. And here the question comes how we should cover these expenses, whether we should spend state budget or these expenses should be included in the tariff of the nuclear energy which we produce in Ukraine.
I understand also that it will be difficult because in the world history we have no examples.
Yeah, there is no such experience.
Yeah.
Many things should be invited from the scratch.
So that is why it becomes more and more problematic for us. Well, thank you very much for fruitful conversation and for your visit. And our guest in the studio was Yurii Urbanskiy, Executive Director of National Ecology Center of Ukraine.